So if you're football betting or you're doing some football Betfair trading strategy, there's one really critical thing that you need to understand, and that is, are there going to be goals and how many are going to be scored? And if you're looking at a range of matches, which matches are more likely to see goals and which ones are less likely to see goals within them? Because if you're participating, for example, on an over-unders market, obviously that's all about goals. And if you can identify specifically the matches where goals are more or less likely, then that will dramatically improve your chance of being profitable in the long term. How do you do that? We're going to explain it in this video. If you're interested in trading with BetAngel, then visit our website where you can download a free trial of BetAngel Professional and BetAngel Trader. If you want to learn how to use them, then visit the Academy where we give you a detailed, structured walkthrough of each product. And if you're an existing user, then head on over to the forum where we have a load of files for you to download to customize and use within BetAngel. So I want you to have a look at this list of fixtures next to me. This is this weekend's Premier League fixtures. And on there you can see a set of odds. But of course the problem you have is that odds don't actually tell you how many goals there are going to be, because you could have a match that's very, very competitive and therefore there aren't many goals within it. But perhaps the underlying structure of the match will determine that a team tends to score more goals, or perhaps they could be defensively quite good and maybe one will cancel out the other, and you could dramatically overthink this particular problem. But actually the solution to understanding which one of these matches is likely to produce more goals than another is actually quite simple. So let's explain the rationale of how that's done, but also, more importantly, how you can do it. So the first thing I'll say here is that we assume that the market is efficient. Now we know that it's not perfectly efficient because I've mentioned this in other videos, but on football, one of the issues that you have is goals tend to occur infrequently and over have big gaps between them. And it's quite possible to dominate a match and still not win it. And it's quite possible to play poorly and win it just through one particular chance. So because of that, the outcome of football matches is fairly variable, and that's generally reflected in the odds because it's quite unpredictable in terms of specifically what the exact score line will be. You may have loads of attempts and no goals, or loads of attempts and lots of goals. That tends to be discounted reasonably well into the odds that we see within the market. And this is the basis on which we're going to create this. And I can tell you now that this does actually work, and I've used it for a number of years, and it's a really good proxy, a quick way of understanding which matches will suit your particular strategy or not. So we're going to use the odds to have a look at it, and more specifically, we're going to be looking at draw odds. So what I've done on this spreadsheet is I've actually collated all of the scores within the Premier League. So you can see there are nearly 8,000 or so scores that I've collated on here. And then I've basically plotted them by what the home team scored and what the away team scored. And I've added up the number of times that occurred out of this particular set. I've then converted that to a percentage, and we're going to use this to take things forward a little bit more. And I'll interject at this particular point because don't get freaked out, it doesn't involve spreadsheets. I'm going to show you a shortcut towards the end of this video and highlight to you the key point that I'm trying to make. But it's important that we work through some of the details so that you fully understand exactly how I arrived at this conclusion. It's not just some sort of guess that I made or something that I picked up off of an internet forum somewhere that seemed to make sense. I want to show you the working that goes behind this as well. So when we've got the data that we require, which is basically the chance of any score occurring within these particular matches, we're going to narrow in and look specifically at the draw. And I'll explain why in a second. But when we strip out all of the other results and we're just left with the draw, you can see the chance of a draw occurring within a particular football match. But what we're also going to do is we're going to basically focus in on that and basically say, if a draw occurs, what is the chance of it being a 0-0, a 1-1, a 2-2, or a 3-3 draw within that particular match? So we take the spreadsheet again and we basically say, if the chance of a draw, if a draw does occur, what's the chance of it being any one of these score lines? And we end up with the data that you can see over here. And this is the basis on what we're going to use to actually be able to calculate and work out which matches are likely to produce goals and which ones are the least likely to produce goals. So let's move on and actually go through that particular calculation with an example. So on this list, the match that we're going to pick out specifically here is Manchester City against Chelsea. And you can see that Manchester City are favoured within this particular match, but you can also see that the draw is priced at odds of 4. What does that mean? If you do a quick calculation, which is 1 divided by that number, 1 divided by 4, you get 0.25. 0.25 represents a 25% chance of actually getting a draw within this particular match. So how are we going to use that to actually be able to work out the chance of goals occurring within this particular match? Well, the good thing is we've done the work already, because if you remember, we've just produced this spreadsheet that basically says to us, if a draw occurs within this match, this is the chance of it being this type of draw. So we know there's a 25% chance of a draw in the Manchester City match, but we also know through the spreadsheet that we created just a little while ago that the chance of a 0-0 is 32%. So if a match ends in a draw, there's a 32% chance it will be 0-0. So all we do is combine those odds together. We multiply 0.25 by 0.32, that spits out a number, and that number is the chance of this particular match ending in a 0-0 draw. So of course what we've actually done here is we have created the correct score market for 0-0 effectively within this match. And you can repeat the same process for 1-1, for 2-1, for 3-1, and onwards from there if you so wish. But basically what we've successfully achieved with just this single calculation is we've actually ranked this particular match in terms of its chance of ending 0-0. In other words, there being no goals. And by default, therefore, we've also worked out the chance of there definitely being more than 0 goals within this particular match. And that will allow us to iterate this process all the way through each of these individual matches and then rank them according to the biggest chance of there being a 0-0 draw to the lowest chance of there being a 0-0 draw. And that will basically allow us to focus in on a match that is absolutely perfect for our strategy. So here's a spreadsheet that I've produced with all the matches on them. Don't freak out when you see this because you don't have to do this. I'm going to show you a shortcut in a second and it will all make perfect logical sense to you. But this is, if you want to delve deeper into this, you can use this method. You can look at some of my previous videos and hopefully begin to combine this all together to allow you to be able to analyze football matches in much better depth and look for little discrepancies and edges within them. But I'll just briefly explain sort of where we've come from on this Man City Chelsea match, and then you can pause this video and look at some of the other results if you want to. But basically we're saying the odds for a draw were 4. That equates to a 25% chance. We know that if there is a draw in a match, 32% of the time it will end in 0-0, so we combine those two together to get 8%, and we can do the same for 1-1, we can do the same for 2-1 and 3-1, and then we can do that across all of the matches that we see this particular weekend. We can then convert those percentages back into odds, and we can rank them according to lowest to highest. So we can see here that Wolves v Southampton is ranked 1, so this is basically saying this has got the highest chance of there being no goals. So this is the match that's likely to produce the least number of goals this weekend. And Liverpool v Brentford is the match that is going to probably produce the most goals this weekend. But of course, with football, it's highly variable, and therefore, you know, any result could occur. But over the course of a season, it's more likely, if you use a method like this, to home in on identifying these types of matches, that they will all average out to be correctly the lowest or highest scoring matches and so on. And that's where you would put your strategy. If you're measuring your strategy over what happens this weekend and not what happens over the next month or the whole season, you're approaching it the wrong way. You're trying to get the best sort of idea on average over a long period of time. But of course, on football, individual results will vary quite a bit. So, you know, we can't guarantee that they will all fall into this rank this weekend, but we just know over a period of time, it's very likely that they will. And what you can see over here, I've typed in the actual odds to sort of sanity check it, and you can see the market generally agrees with this. There are some minor discrepancies in there which possibly hint at value or additional information within the market. But the overall difference between what we have come up with and what the market has come up with is actually pretty tiny. And of course the market contains an over round, so there will always be a slight difference between
how you've priced the market to 100% and how the odds are created within the actual market itself. They will always be slightly different. But I hope that that's given you a little bit more depth in exactly what we're doing here and why.
So I hope that that has all made sense to you. What I'm trying to do here is to fill out your level of knowledge in terms of what you're looking at within a market. I have produced other videos where we're talking about similar sort of things, specifically around pricing and what the odds represent and how they represent things in that particular manner. But what we're doing here is we're answering a question, a key question, because if you're betting or you're trading, you're sort of saying, well, I want loads of goals or I don't want goals. That will affect how that bet or trade turns into a profit. And that's what we're sort of shortcutting here for you. And of course, you know, what we've actually done here is we've basically looked at the match odds market and predicted what's going to happen in the correct score market. So, I mean, you can look at the correct score market to sort of work this out as well. But the most important thing that we're doing here is we're actually forming that link for you. We're telling you how that's created, how to do it yourself. And of course, if you're developing a strategy, then you could sort of frame it around that as well. So you sort of say, I'm not going to put this strategy into markets where there's a less than X% chance of this occurring. And that's ultimately how you get that consistency and how you'll be able to develop an edge, and one that will be profitable over the longer term. But of course, you know, ultimately, the conclusion that we have from this particular level of analysis is that actually, you know, the shorter the price on the draw, then it's generally forecasting that there will be fewer goals. Now, that's quite a broad brush to paint, and you can refine it in a number of ways, but that's effectively sort of some of the things that you're seeing here. And if you go into BetAngel, you can actually add additional columns into Guardian, where you can put up additional information. You can even do the calculation that we've done here. And then that will basically allow you to put that information into Guardian. So when you go into a market, you can actually search and sort and filter by some of this particular criteria. You just need to do a little bit of automation if you want to do some clever stuff. And then you can actually put some additional calculations in to the Guardian columns to allow you to do that. And that will allow you, rather than having to do complicated spreadsheets, you could actually shortcut most of this process. If I bring up a screenshot, this was one I did in the sort of 5 minutes after editing this video, because I haven't done it yet as I'm recording this video. But all I've basically done is added the odds in to Guardian and then added some color gradients and then sorted by the draw, because obviously that would be the first lead in to give us a clue as to which matches are most likely to be of interest to us. But yeah, hopefully this filled out your knowledge in terms of this sort of analysis a little bit further. And it's the sort of thing that I do every week. And hopefully you'll be able to do that with a little bit more confidence from here. And that will allow you to develop a strategy that is geared specifically around how many goals are likely to be scored within a match.